I want to tell you a story about an innkeeper in Asheville. My wife and I just went on a vacation, and one of the places we went was to Asheville, North Carolina, and we stayed at a bed and breakfast. Our innkeeper's name was Peter, and I noticed something interesting about Peter. He was really good at being an innkeeper. When we came down for breakfast, the first thing he said was, how'd you sleep? And where'd you go for dinner last night? He immediately got us talking about ourselves. And we told him the restaurant we had picked in his city, and he knew all about it. And gave us some stories that he has accrued over the course of his time there about the restaurant we'd picked, and he affirmed our choice. He asked where we were from, where we were driving in from, and we said, "Oh, well, we're from Springfield, Missouri." And without missing a beat, the innkeeper says, "Oh yeah, Springfield. I know all about Springfield. Hammond's Tower, right? All those buildings are named after John Q. Hammonds." And we were like, "Yes, they sure are." And we started talking about Springfield. He's like, "Yeah, my cousin's been postmaster there for 25 years, and my sister went to Southwest Missouri State University." And we were like, "Well, it's not Southwest anymore. It's just Missouri State." And so we're talking about Springfield and different things, and we instantly felt this connection, personal connection with this guy we had never met. And I realized that even in the moment, and thought about it more afterwards, that what this innkeeper was engaging in was the simple process of audience analysis. That's what we're going to be talking about in this video and the chapter that you're reading today. The purpose of audience analysis, whether you're an innkeeper or giving a public speech or doing anything else, is people are more likely to listen to you, they're more likely to like you if they feel some kind of a personal connection with you. So it's important to analyze your audience, find out what your audience is like, what they care about, and then connect yourself and your persona in some way to those interests if you can. And that's what this innkeeper did. Now, you have to be authentic in doing this. I noticed that Peter, the innkeeper, followed the exact same formula for every new guest who came down to join us at breakfast. He asked them where did they eat for supper, and then affirmed their restaurant choice, asked them where they were from, and then, without missing a beat, made a pretty amazingly specific connection to wherever they happened to be in the world. He was a well-traveled man. Now, it would have been a mistake. I thought about this. It would have been amusing if some guy came down to join us for breakfast the next day, and Peter, having forgotten what he told us the day before, was talking to some other guest, and they're like, "Oh, I'm from Anchorage, Alaska." And it would have been funny if he would have said something like, "Oh yeah, my cousin was a postmaster in Anchorage, Alaska for 25 years." Because then it would have been clear that he's just good at spinning tall tales, and none of it was actually true. And he would have lost that sense of personal connection that he had formerly cultivated with my wife and I. But he didn't do that. I'm just saying that would have been a mistake. You sometimes see this in the political world. Politicians will adopt the local accent when they are giving speeches sometimes. I'm thinking of one or two in particular. But anyway, like when they go down into the South, they have this little Southern twang that they normally don't have. And you might not even notice it, but they do that to try to connect with the audience where they're speaking, and they would never speak with that twang if they were up in the North. Um, you have to be careful to not be inauthentic when trying to, or not seem inauthentic when you're making these connections. You can't be all things to all people, and that's what some politicians, it seems like, don't understand. And so, as far as public speaking goes, this leads us to the concept of the target audience. You can't necessarily be all things to all people, but you do need to have a good, solid understanding of who your audience is, and who you can connect with, how you can bring as many people into the fold as possible, so to speak, in terms of connecting with their message. There's a number of ways to do that. The book talks about demographic audience analysis and psychological audience analysis. And demographic audience analysis is pretty straightforward. You have to think about the different aspects of your audience's makeup. If your audience is primarily younger people, you wouldn't want to make references to historical events before their time. If they're all older people, you don't want to be constantly talking about like whatever the new trendy thing is on social media. However, you also don't want to stereotype like I just may have done. There's plenty of older adults who know way more about social media than I do. So it's extremely tricky, and I'll give you an example of that. You know, none of us are perfect. I once had a student who wanted to give a demonstration speech on video games. You know, interesting topic. And the student was male, and he came out and immediately started his speech this way. He said, "Hey everybody, today I'm talking about video games, and I know that the women in the audience are interested in this, so I'm talking mainly to the men today." And you know, my head exploded because I realized right away that man, he's alienated half of his audience the first thing out of his mouth. And so that is not the correct way to start a speech when you're trying to identify with the audience. You want to give them some kind of a reason to listen to you, and that reason needs to be located in who they think you are. Is your identity close to theirs? Can you understand their experiences or not? Can you validate them as people and their lived experience? It's hard because, well, like the book says, you have an audience of diverse backgrounds, diverse demographics, diverse ages. So you need to gather that information some way or another. And there's a couple of ways to do that. And, mostly people do it informally, just taking a look at you know, who they think their audience is, making some generalizations based on the type of event that they're speaking at. You know, the crowd at the Rotary Club may be slightly different from the crowd at wherever else you may be speaking. You know, at FFA, for example. May be different from your group of friends that you meet for coffee every morning or something like that. Every group is different, and they're going to call for you to say different things in different ways. One thing that I want to close on is the situational audience analysis. Different situations also call for different things. Just as different groups are going to expect different things, so situations also call for different types of behavior. You would, if you're giving a best man speech or a maid of honor speech, you will probably tell some jokes and be lighthearted because it's a wedding. But if you are giving a eulogy at a funeral, clearly the same tone of levity and humor would be inappropriate in that sense because the situations call for different types of speeches and different methods of presentation. So there's really a lot to audience analysis. It's one of the most important concepts that we're going to be covering. When you are giving your demonstration speech, you want to make sure that the information you're giving fits with your audience. You don't want to be talking way over our head, giving us expert level information that we're not equipped to understand. And you also don't want to talk so far beneath us that we're going to be bored and offended that that the information is so simple. And the nice thing about it is your audience tends to be pretty forgiving. They know that you can't be all things to all people, and that you're aiming for the nice middle section when you are putting together your information. Not too complicated, not too simple, but appropriate for an audience of your peers. What I mainly ask is attempt not to exclude anyone in your language. We don't want to be sexist in our language, always using gendered pronouns of one gender or the other. We don't want to be heteronormative. We don't want to be ageist, privileging the experiences of only the very young and very old. And all of the other things in the textbook that talk about being widely inclusive, not alienating anyone in the audience, because it's the way to produce a good speech. Without talking about whether it's the way to be a good humanitarian or a good person, it's definitely the way to produce a good speech. A good speech connects with its audience, and we have to be thinking about all of these different considerations when you go about putting together a speech that will connect with the audience. All right. I will see you again next time when we talk about Chapter 6.